to hear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a school teacher's voice and I can really shout. But I do thank you so much. And Boyle Landmark Trust welcomes everyone here. And also I want to thank the library for partnering with us because they've made the space available. And we have some Center College people, Rebecca Tucker and Sarah Wells, and they're with Center's AmeriCorps program, and they're the ones that designed the flyer and the brochures that passed around town and that I sent a couple hundred out in the mail. So, but we thank them for that. From Center College and the library and is this Loretta? Okay, well, let's have her sit up here. Oh, no.
When,
Up here.
if you'll bring Loretta up here, she'll sit with Barbara and come to me.
Well, we'll just wait a minute.
Bringing chairs
Well, I'll go ahead. Boyle Landmark Trust welcomes everyone this evening. If there are any students in the audience, we welcome them because we feel that this is very important for education, our education mission. My precious, sit down now. I'm going to introduce you. I love you dearly. And our efforts to continue to raise awareness for our history caused us to present this lecture about Judge Samuel McDowell. Tom Ellis will deliver the lecture, and we will hear Kentucky history that Tom has learned from years of working with Dr. Tom Clark, who was with the University of Kentucky, and he is our historian laureate. And we have a special guest this evening with us, Loretta Clark, and I'm so glad that she could join us tonight. And that's the connection here, in case you're wondering why Loretta and not Tom Clark. Well, because Tom Ellis has learned from Tom Clark, and we still have Loretta with us. So, she's a dear friend in preservation, as well as she's an artist, and she's also a pianist, and she's also a great inspiration for her late husband, historian Dr. Tom Clark. So we thank you for coming tonight. We go back a long time. So we will learn now that Samuel McDowell played a pivotal role in the formation of our community as well as our state and our nation. Tom Ellis and his wife Peggy fell in love with Danville, and I'm glad you fell in love, but with Danville too, years ago, and purchased the 1820s Joseph McDowell home. It's out on Terrible Road. And they became inspired to delve into Samuel McDowell's life. So Boyle Landmark Trust is pleased to present Tom and your information and your history on Judge Samuel McDowell.
Thank you, Barbara. Folks, if you have not met Barbara Hewlett in the past, you must get to know her because the Boyle Landmark Trust is affording me the opportunity under their auspices, and I don't know of anyone in any county around this state. Peg and I, our corporate careers, have traveled throughout this wonderful Commonwealth, and I don't know anyone who works harder on behalf of historic preservation than Barbara. And it's to her credit that she's given just a fellow who grew up in the south end of Louisville who became passionate about history in general and Kentucky specifically. I don't know anybody like Barbara who has given me this opportunity, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Speak up!
Oh, I will. Well, Peg knows I will. Now can you hear me? And I would thank Mary Gerard and Jen Booton. They've been tremendous, and the library staff here, as well as the Landmark Trust, in helping me to put this together. I will say now, there's this slight debate being sponsored tonight by KET. I have a watch that will go off at 7:10. I will wrap up by 7:15. Open the floor for questions. I will not be the slightest bit offended as you vacate the building, and where two or more biblically continue to gather, I will answer questions. My wife will tell you that she will cut off my internal mic at 7:20, so after 46 years, I do obey. She's also made sure that I have an outline. I actually have two, so I'm going to do two quick summaries. But Samuel McDowell, as I learned from Dr. Clark, was so complex, such an intellect, in comparison to his father, who was known as a man of the gun rather than of the book, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But the complexity of the mind of Samuel McDowell, you'll learn about over the next 30 or 40 minutes. His moral fiber, his character, his Christian walk is just unmatched in the history of Kentucky. He presided over and orchestrated over 10 conventions. Our Constitution, which came into being June 1 of 1792. 3 district judges were named by George Washington. The first 2 got very close haircuts, were killed and scalped by Indians. Later on, George Washington signed the papers to make him the first federal judge in the what became Kentucky. He was a founder of Danville before Kentucky was anything more than a territory, 1787. He was a founder of the Danville Political Club when he invited people into Pleasant Vale, his home that he built. Then he afforded the movement of that to Constitution Square, where that building still stands today. There are tremendous stories, even by Speed Museum in Louisville, one of the early wealthy families of Kentucky, where there's this endearing quote where Speed got tired, a little bit too much bourbon, went upstairs, and there were still 15 or 18 tremendously intellectual men gathered downstairs talking about the founding of Kentucky, and yet they were going home to their puncheon, flattened board floor cabins, or even dirt floors. And yet many of these men had laid down their families' lives and fortunes to fight for the founding of this nation. He was a founder of the Presbyterian Church here in Danville. He was among the first pioneer families. And to put that in context, he had a land grant in unsettled central Kentucky. If you know anything about Louisville, 45 years before that Long Run massacre that occurred 19 miles from the river in downtown Louisville in 1820. Think how unsettled things were at that time. That's that first quick summary that I wanted to give you. Samuel McDowell was born in Pennsylvania in 1735. He died in Danville in 1817. He was Scotch-Irish, but of course a British citizen. He moved to Virginia before he was 8 years old. In 1743, somewhere in the central part of Old Virginia, his father was essentially the constable for that region where there was a fort. They were attacked out in the area. Several of the settlers were killed by the Indians. On Christmas Day, as that constable, he gathered a couple of dozen men. They went out after the Indians. On Christmas Day, his father was killed. He was 8 years old. An uncle and others gathered around him, his younger brother, his younger sister, raised him to adulthood. Fast forwarding, and I'm going to do flashbacks like they do on television all throughout the presentations. So stay with me. My history students, when I was being certified at Boyle County, they were going, who is this crazy man? He keeps going forward and coming back. Stay with me. He's still 8 years old with that younger sister and brother, but now going forward. When he came of age as a British citizen, out there in the middle of nowhere, he did something totally uncharacteristic, but showed his character all through his life. He petitioned to divide the farm in all his holdings equally with his brother and sister. That touched me as I'm studying.
You got a microphone, I think, right there.
Do I need the microphone?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah,
hear me?
yes.
Okay, I'll keep loud throughout.
Yeah.
He had broken centuries of privilege as a British citizen. We don't see that type of character today. At age 20, he fought saddle to saddle with a guy named George Washington in the French and Indian War. He was made captain by George Washington. He fought in the Dunmore War, the Ohio Territory, in 1774. What are we getting close to here, folks? He was aide de camp to a guy named Isaac Shelby. Fast forward again, about 20 years, his son, Ephraim, marries Isaac Shelby's daughter. Coming back when he's a younger man, he is a member of the Virginia legislature. In the House of Burgesses, when, as Benjamin Franklin was saying about this same time, gentlemen, we either hang together or we will most assuredly hang separately. He comes up with this unique concept, but others are talking about it. He may not be aware of it, of the rights of man, totally against the crown. Fair and equitable colonial representation. As a member of the convention in 1776, he's a delegate in Williamsburg, Virginia, just as the guys are shuttered behind doors in Philadelphia, and they shutter the windows too for the Second Continental Congress, and he is one of two sending papers forward as we are getting ready to declare independence from the crown. They are now declaring that we will be free and independent from Great Britain. He fought in the Revolutionary War at age 41. 3 of his sons, 2 entered as officers. He himself, again, beside George Washington, enters as a colonel. He marries, at a younger age, Mary McClung. She was known as the most beautiful woman in all of Virginia. They had, as in the newspaper the other day, it was reported 12 children. All of my research showed 11, but must have been that 1 died at birth. I have 7 sons, 4 daughters. He received that land grant that I spoke of earlier in 1775 in what was Fayette County, but you know that there were 3 counties, Fayette, Jefferson, and Lincoln, that was in the region of Lexington that he got that first land grant. It came over into what's now Mercer, and he got more land as a public surveyor when that took place. He actually moved half of his family to Kentucky in 1783. Again, he was part of the formation of Danville in 1787 and became one of its first trustees soon after. I want to pass out, I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to pass these out. Might not be enough for everyone to have them, so please share if they are not. This is one of the most exciting things that I found. When I first received this a couple of weeks ago, one of the McDowell descendants found this in Syracuse University. This is, and there's a larger version of it over here, this to me is the Declaration of Independence from the Kentucky Territory to the Virginia House of Representatives. And I was vexed by the left-hand signature for the longest time. And just Saturday, I went back one more time to some pieces that I had from the gentleman in Syracuse who had sent it to me. And I found a footnote to that left-hand signature. It says Thomas Todd, and what looks like OC or something, OD, or it's CC, Constitutional Clerk, is what the footnote in typewritten print that I found with what this gentleman had sent to me. Thomas Todd. Everything is just snowballing in what I'm finding out about Samuel. Thomas Todd went on a few years younger than Samuel. Samuel, as you'll see if you can stay after I stop at 7:15, Thomas Todd, somewhat mentored by Samuel, goes on because Samuel is becoming close to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Todd in 1807 is named an early Justice of our United States Supreme Court, coming out of Kentucky. Thomas Todd finds out that a young woman has been widowed. She had been married to George Washington's nephew, Washington, who was Dolly Madison's sister, and they were married as the first couple ever to be married in the White House. This is just all Kentuckians who are making it into the national limelight. But this is nothing compared to what you're going to learn later on about Samuel himself. Flashback, during the Revolutionary War, when he is a colonel, he is assigned in those central Kentucky hills of Virginia. And things are so tough that the British, knowing that if they can win those hills in central Virginia by sending in legions of Indians to kill off those rebellious colonists, that they can then storm George Washington and the war will be over. And they're not going to have to fight against these revolutionaries ever again. And we have correspondence back and forth from Samuel McDowell petitioning Thomas Jefferson that he needs more arms and more powder and more lead to maintain what is going on as a colonel in those mountains and help survive as one of the two colonels in charge of the regiments that are saving what ultimately helps to win the Revolutionary War. He is so inspired during that Second Continental Congress when he hears, and this, when I was teaching history, is an area that I really dwelt on because I am too. Go back after tonight and read Patrick Henry's speech. Read how he treats the backbenchers behind those shuttered doors, because getting those votes was not easy. There were some states that were holding out saying, "Golly, do you know that Benjamin Franklin is right? We will hang together or separately." Read what Patrick Henry said to those folks. It was not pretty. But Samuel McDowell was so impressed with Patrick Henry's speech that he went home and somehow got up high enough on a 30-foot, and you've seen poplar trees that have no branches for 30 feet. He cuts it off, strips the bark off, and declares it a liberty pole because of Patrick Henry's speech, and it is declared in history as the first liberty pole going against the crown in United States history. Wonder what they would have done to him if they'd have found him. after he did that. And you know that word got out. I mean, he's a traitor to the crown. Another piece of that I stressed when I taught history here at Boyle County. George Mason was right in there with the best of them, right beside Patrick Henry. But he refused to sign the Declaration of Independence. Very few in this room would know that because, folks, my football coach only showed the films of my bad plays, teaching social studies, not Kentucky history. George Mason did not sign, and you don't want to go to that school today because they've changed the curriculum. That's all I'll say about that. He would not be happy. He would not sign the Declaration of Independence because he wanted immediately to attach the Bill of Rights to it. What a man! What an incredible individual he was. But I'm getting away from our man that we're talking about tonight. Samuel McDowell became known in the constitutional conventions, plural, 10 of them, as a man of calm, patience, discretion, ethics, cool term. My teachers accused me of this. Calculated procrastination. And one who thwarted conspirators and schemers. In doing all of that and pulling it together, he kept Kentucky on track towards statehood. I will get in a few minutes toward the concept of the Spanish conspiracy. Please tell me if you've heard of the Spanish conspiracy. This is an incredible piece of history that is not being taught in high school, was not taught even by that football coach, wasn't in our textbooks, is not being taught in college, and only 5% of the people in this room, as I saw it and calculated, and I'm lousy at math, but not more than 10, have heard of it. The world affairs at that time, and I'll get back in 5 minutes to this, but here are world affairs from 1780 to 1805. England is oppressive and going around the world, colonial rule, empire building, fierce in their world power on the seas. Want to mess with them? Nobody wants to mess with them. France. Obsession with taking things on worldwide. Thank heaven he decided to mess with Russia. He had wonderful designs on the Caribbean part of the world. Because of disease and uprisings in the Caribbean, he failed there. We were fiercely in debt to France. France had designs on Great Britain. Not a good idea, Napoleon, so he kind of backed away after a couple of overtures. And he began to be in desperate need for some funds for his troops. Spain, 1588. The Spanish Armada decided to take on Great Britain. Bad move. Down to the bottom of the ocean. They had ruled the ocean for over 200 years. We all grew up knowing how tough they were. Gone 200 years before what we're talking about. They were in dire straits financially and militarily, and they were not able to cope with America's immigration. But they held New Orleans, and they held some power there at the Mississippi. Napoleon wanted it, we needed it, we Kentuckians needed it. Excuse me. Oh, damn Yankees. I'm Yankee born. I'm sorry to admit that here, Peg, I'm sorry. Western Kentucky girl I married. But Kentucky desperately needed to send our processed corn and other items down river. But the Yankees in New York and Pennsylvania were growing those same crops. and they were double dealing us and just going on past us. Russia. How many people saw Russia in the equation back then? They had owned Alaska forever. The fur trade was bountiful to them. They started down through California. They ran into these guys who'd been here forever from Spain. They were coming up through Northern California, and they said, "Who are you guys anyway with that funny, awful accent with no vowels?" They didn't get along at first, but then the Indians, they helped each other out with the Indians, and this 62-year-old with no vowels said, "Well, can I come down and meet your head guy in Mexico?" So he did, and they had a treaty formed around the fact that he forgot that he had a wife and kids back home in Russia, so he married a 14-year-old. Oh well, he wasn't a Christian. So, that worked for a good long time. Fast forwarding again, just like television, that worked until 1839. Think about it. They had tremendous timber trade all throughout California. They began to mine certain kinds of things that they were finding in the ground through 1839, but they didn't get to Sutter's Mill, and they had famine, they had disease, they started to have some more problems with Indians, so they said, "You know what, we don't need this," and thank the Lord, divine providence, they went home. 10 years, folks, 10 more years. All of this intrigue was going on. Mexican was getting super jealous. They weren't glad that any of these people were coming around. And so here we were with all this intrigue going on. But let's get back to Kentucky now. Let's get back to the 1780s and Samuel McDowell and what he is faced with. The Spanish intrigue, the Spanish conspiracy is now going on through the early 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th constitutional conventions. And the Yankees are double dealing us down in the Gulf of Mexico. The Spanish have to survive. Do you all have the map with the quote? Read that quote. This is the most glorious thing that's happened to me in meeting Dr. Clark, and the burden that he put on me that's caused me to study. With what I gave you about the world and what they saw could happen, this is what Samuel McDowell understood could be. He was a visionary. He understood what could happen in this land. And this is why, when he figured out that a guy named James Wilkinson, we never learned that in high school or college, this guy who was his contemporary, who had fought in the Revolutionary War, who happened to be a good buddy of a guy named Aaron Burr. Oh, well, he fought in the Revolution, kind of on both sides. And so did James Wilkinson, get paid on both sides. And then he moved to Kentucky. And then, and Dr. Clark confirmed this to me, rumors, we've never found it in the literature, barrels of flour started appearing on Spanish ships, and they were kind of heavy at the bottom because there were gold coins alleged to have been in the bottom, and they were being brought to Kentucky because these frontiers buckskin guys who had nothing to eat were being bribed because of this place called the Louisiana Purchase that's on your map there. That was still held by Spain. It was back and forth because Napoleon sold it, bought it, sold it. It's curious about the paperwork on the Louisiana Purchase, but Spain allegedly was holding it, definitely held the Gulf of Mexico and the ports of New Orleans. And the deal between James Wilkinson being an agent for Spain was you keep those frontiersmen from voting with Samuel McDowell, and we will make you well. We will make you so well that you will never have to hurt for anything. And he had designs of owning, and some of the reports say half of Texas. And this is where Samuel McDowell, in my terms, was just kind of hunkering down, taking his toe around in the dirt and saying to the frontiersmen, you know, stay with me, do things that will eventually work to your advantage. I don't know how he did it. I don't know what he had that he could offer them. Their children were starving. This was the time, by the way, if you ever saw it on the History Channel, it is documented in history that it was not rumor, it was true that from about 1760 to 1820, we had what was known as the Little Ice Age. My brother lives in Syracuse, where I'm getting some of this information from a wonderful McDowell who's sending me all these emails. We had their winter. My brother gets 100 inches of snow a year. We had it in Kentucky during the Little Ice Age. So what could these guys forage for? We've got some coffee tree beans up here. That's what they would boil and drink. They might squirrel hunt if the squirrels survived those winters, but they were starving. They wanted that gold. They wanted that deal. They wanted what Wilkinson could get for them from the Spanish. And Samuel McDowell held it together. That document that some of you have, if not most of you have, is, and I have been able to read about 80% of the words. It's beautiful language. And that is dated about 8 lines down, 1788, and June 1 of 1792, after the 10th convention, Samuel McDowell was able to pull it together and make us a state. And here we have, over here, Constitution, we have correspondence dated in April, and then correspondence, I think, dated in December from a fellow named George Washington. Oh, and I haven't told you some other intrigue. He's writing to Virginia 4 and 5 and 6 years earlier when we're getting close to language. Well, guess who's blocking it now? Congress. We might have been the 12th state. Congress. I've got some of those documents, but I wasn't going to bore you with those. But Washington, D.C. wasn't ready for Kentucky to be a state. Politics. But he persevered. And if that had bollocksed it up, James Wilkinson was doing this. Hallelujah. Those guys who don't know what I'm up to, and Samuel does, they're helping me. And I'm going to own half of Texas. And somehow, with starving frontiersmen, Samuel McDowell was the glue that helped us to become the Commonwealth. And I think we're only 3 or 4 Commonwealths in Texas.
Virginia.
Maybe 5, yeah. And how they did that, I don't know. You know, this is something that I know, George, you've told me we've kind of got the Danville Political Club. I was privileged in high school to be among 19 of us, and we had our own little political club. And we debated both sides of the issue and pulled each other's hair out. Mine came back by the roots. But we need more of that. Open, honest debate, reasonable, rational, logical. And these guys were amazing. I told you about Speed. I think they were a European family who came over with wealth and just built on it. He went to bed and wrote notes of what they were saying downstairs about these wonderful men who were educated, intellectual. He put it, when he got back to Louisville, he put it in a secret drawer, Peggy. He put it in a secret drawer of a desk, just like you've got. And it was not discovered until his grandson was fooling around one day with the desk that he inherited, and he found the secret drawer. And he opened it up, and we have that piece of history that was just discovered 80 years after the gentleman right down here in Constitution Square was so taken by these men who had almost given up their lives down here preparing to be a state. And Samuel McDowell was right there amongst them, having held the first ones at his home and then at the tavern. And by the way, everything up here we brought, if you want to stay and have discussion, you know, that other thing that's going on at 8 o'clock, if you want to stay here and we can talk about it, because things up here date from 1760 to maybe 1810, and they would have been in many of the homes, some wealthy, some crude. The flag in there, that tall picture, there would have been some of that changed Kentucky corn in that thing. Some might have used that, some might have put tea in it, I don't know. But if you want to come and stay, we'll talk about some of those items. I'm going to go ahead and cut short so that if you need to leave and travel anywhere before you get to that KET debate, but if you have questions, I'll go ahead and stop there. I know that I've got other notes here, but I'd rather entertain your questions and give you an opportunity to get to the KET debate. So thank you for your attention. Peg, have I left anything out from the outline? I often do.
Many things.
Well, the point is, we have to educate high school, middle school kids on this incredible man that I didn't know about until the privilege of getting to know Dr. Clark when I was about 35 years old and the ensuing years. And Loretta, I'm indebted to you as well because you were so kind when I come to your home. And thank you for coming tonight. Quentin, Becky, thank you too. Thank you all very much.
Hello. Where's Samuel McDowell?
Right here in Bellevue. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Yes.
I have a question. So Danville was obviously a very active place politically early on, but then the capital moved and everything. Why didn't Danville keep being the center of politics in Kentucky? Do you know?
Why wasn't the capital maintained here in Danville?
Somebody in Frankfurt had more money.
We wanted bonds.
I'm sure it had to do with money.
Water.
It could have been that they are on a river. That made a lot of difference. I can't give you a truly valid answer. It's a great question, and I'll be happy to research that. Excellent question. Peg?
Well, I will say this, there was consideration for making Lexington.
And even
the
Louisville.
capital, and Louisville, there's a lot of
Louisville's
debate.
not in Kentucky. We grew up there. Trust me, when you go to Frankfurt, Louisville is not part of Kentucky.
And then they decided to set the capital. And so, and a lot of people wanted it here, and a lot of people wanted it there, and a lot of people wanted it in the next, and how it really came down to ending up in Frankfurt. I'm like Tom, I can't quite remember, but there was much discussion, debate, and disagreement about that at the time.
Yes.
I will say that the main street here is extra wide. There was land reserved at the east end that those
Correct.
men that you're discussing had set aside, and I believe it was for a capital.
That, I have
Now,
heard
what
that told.
happened after that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Why.
Very political.
Repeat what she said, we couldn't hear.
That Main Street was laid out with the vision that Danville indeed would remain designated as the capital for the Commonwealth. And of course, the argument is Danville, which I believe to be true, the geographic center of the state, or is Harrodsburg? And I think if you GPS it, it is Danville. but I
Well,
think they
it's
still.
the center of those three courts.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, thank you, Barbara. As a Christian, this is so important. Mary, yes, Samuel, Mary McDowell. You know, I'm pretty important, he wouldn't have said that. I'm passionate about our Presbyterian church, and you know my duties as a leader in the church. They've asked me to come to is it the Synod in the Presbyterian church? I've been asked to come to the next Synod meeting. Okay, you want me to pack you a lunch? Oh, well, yeah, okay. So he hopped on his horse at age 82, and heaven knows how, but he rode 240 miles to Nashville and back for the Synod meeting in Nashville. Folks, I admire Ephraim so much for his 70-mile ride to the mountain, or to the hill cabin of Jane Todd Crawford in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But Samuel was 82 and rode 240 miles and back because he was so passionate a Christian that he was willing. Thank you for bringing that out. I hate to miss that portion. I mean, this is a man's man to have that kind of stamina in his 80s to be able to accomplish that and care so deeply about his Christian beliefs. Again, 8 years old, his father's killed on Christmas Day, 82 years old, that commitment that he would make that ride. Yes, sir.
I may be wrong, but there was a large brick building on Constitution Square, and I think it was referred to as the first capital of Kentucky. You may know that, you may not.
That the first capital was here,
Yeah.
and what's that location? I didn't quite hear you.
On Constitution Square.
Oh, on Constitution Square.
Two-story brick building.
Yeah. And by the way, you know I've got something here for you tonight. One of those coffee beans. The problem with these, oh, by the way, two things about Kentucky coffee trees. If you want that as the Kentucky tree, we got to go back to 1994 because they changed it to the tulip poplar in 1994. That's your General Assembly. And the other thing, if you ever want to grow one, Peg nearly made me cut ours down because for 10 to 12 years, they go up like a flagpole and they're like a fern. What looks like limbs drop off. And ours finally, 2 years ago, branched and held them, and these are our first crop of coffee beans. So if anybody wants to try one, stick around for a while. More questions? And I'll be happy to walk around and talk to you about some of these signs because they might need some explanations. Yes?
So he gets Kentucky made a state, and then he dies here in Danville in 1870. Was most of the later part of his life just the church and family, or was he out? Did he still keep his fingers in the political pie?
Well, I don't think he stayed very political. He was very active in the church. He was a federal judge, and as far as I know, kept that judgeship until he died. Don't know how active he had to be as a federal judge at that point, because there would have been others who would have been surrounding him, but I think he retained that position, and of all, just as so many positions like that, he would have been given that title in respect until he died. Yes, sir.
Would you like to mention about Boyle Landmark Trust's interest in trying to preserve Pleasant Vale? That has a little bit to do with why we're discussing him right now.
It's one of those many important structures in this community, and we're hopeful about that. I think that's about as far as we'd want to go tonight. Yeah. Yes?
I've had a call from some of the family members, and they're trying to plan a special event around 2017. And they are in the process of trying to raise money to restore the cemetery plots that are there. They're in terrible shape. Or get a new marker for them. So if anyone's interested in helping with this.
I am so thrilled that you brought that up. A fellow named Bob Gang has a contract, he's a licensed engineer, and he's working in Lexington. Flew down here, took an extra day, showed up on our front porch, and we sat there for 2 hours and talked. He's the one who gave me the handwritten piece that you have there from Samuel McDowell. I'm so thrilled to meet him, and he's told me the same thing, not about the graveyard. Wonderful. Jody Lassiter wants to meet him because these are the kinds of mini conventions that Jody wants to bring here. I mean, we are the center of so much about preservation that the Landmark Trust wants to cause to burgeon for this community. I mean, look what we have here for history. This is why Peg and I fell in love with this community 30 years ago in our respective corporate travels throughout this state. This became the center that actually 40 years ago, I was fortunate to come here for the governor's tour when Ford was governor. I had no gray hair, and they thought I was the guy who was supposed to unload the bus when the art center opened up. I mean, they really did. They said, "Son, would you, are you the guy that the bus driver is supposed to have?" No, I'm here because the president of Blue Cross sent me because he was out in Washington State speaking. So anyway, I enjoyed it and fell in love with this community back then. And Peg traveled for a paint company, and we both, and Peg found our house, so years later, so. But yes, I mean, we need to encourage folks like the McDowells, and they're all over this country, and Bob Gang has put what we're doing here tonight on Facebook, and we need to encourage other families to do likewise, to come back here to their roots, and Jody Lassiter and I are going to get together and try to make sure that some lead bags come in early and we can showcase this community and tell them what we can do for them when they want to come here with 200 people.
2017, is that correct?
September 2017, and they're already doing their plans for it, and they haven't acted like they need us, but we're going to make them need us. Yes?
Can you confirm, was Samuel McDowell with Washington at Yorktown when Cromwell surrendered?
I can't yet say that. I believe that's in some of the literature that I've gotten. But Gang sent me 90 emails. Yes,
That's what she said. We couldn't.
Was Samuel McDowell at Yorktown at the surrender? And I think I've got a document to confirm that.
I've read that.
I think you're right. I think you are right about that.
And I would just like to point out that this is why I love this man so much. He says, I don't have a primary source document yet, but I'm looking for one.
I probably do on my
Yeah,
computer.
he is looking for one, and that is what I love. Good research.
Thank you. Any more questions? We have refreshments. I'll stay till the last person leaves, and I'll turn the lights out. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you for coming out.